I really like it. So cool. We are live. I'm gonna pull up. What I usually do is I go to, because it takes a little while for the LinkedIn to pop up, so I usually wait until that's ready. Post views. Let's see if we can find it here. Usually it pops up soon. Come on, LinkedIn, you got it. There we go. All right, cool. So this is nice and muted. I will drag this over to the corner. And
Max is live.
Shocking, is it not? So yeah, the comments usually pull up right there. And cool, awesome. So we're probably not going to be necessarily you. You clapped it. I love that. Oh my god. So cool. Yeah. Exciting. We usually have a little bit of a board where we can just get right and going and get started. So I'm Max. This is Entrepreneur. Yay, hoorah! And this is Jeremy Becker. We have him on the show today, and that's going to be the main piece of what we're talking about, because Jeremy does some really, really cool stuff, and I want to interview the heck out of him for it. So I'm going to pop him right up there, and we're just going to get moving. We're not going to really do any websites or any building. Just going to kind of have a discussion today, which is different from what we usually do, because usually I have a bunch of different websites where I try to build an app or some bullshit. But yeah, cool, awesomeness. Introduce yourself. Tell us all about Jeremy. Just give us a little bit of a rundown so we know who we're talking to.
That's a great question. And I'm a human being.
That's great.
My background is I build products. So I'm a designer and a developer by trade, full stack engineer. Started out learning to code when I was 6, and so I started just like doing that over the years. Also an entrepreneur. I've built a lot of different companies. At this point, I started when I was a kid, I would do like landscaping for all the neighborhoods.
That's awesome.
And so I had like a monopoly on the art cul-de-sac. And it was a great time.
I love it.
I was in business with my brother. Then he wanted to compete with me. I had to see my clients, and so I had him deliver my underbid. It was great. I was savage. It's funny because we tell different versions of the story.
Of course.
He'll say like, "You're evil," and I'll be like, I was very like savage. So
yeah, no, the market. You gotta be brutal in the market. Come on.
Exactly. So I did that. I got into event production when I was really young. So I was about 13. I started doing concerts and festivals, and stuff like that. And then I tried to do a few of those, and I got into like I met all these artists. Started doing artist management, artist booking, and then I rediscovered tech. I kept learning how to build stuff and design stuff. I didn't know there's a difference between designing and building, so just sort of went with it. And I started doing like websites for people super randomly, just like friends of friends. They'd be like, "Yo, I need a website," things like that. Then I went into my first startup when I was 16. I was in high school at that point, and we had like decks of playing cards or discounts at local restaurants, and we raised some money, scaled to 2 cities. All the schools went on strike, and that was our main model of sales, was fundraisers. And
Interesting.
So we went from like huge projections to $0. If you Google it, the company got acquired is what it says. It's not at all true.
Wait, what am I Googling?
Taste locally city dining cards.
City dining cards.
No.
Let's see.
Throw Buffalo in there or something. It wasn't Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Yeah, that's the one. I'm also not mentioned on this at all. I'm not cool.
That's really funny. Oh my god. I posted with Victoria. It's always been a strategy. Blah blah blah. That's really, really funny.
My favorite part is they have this quote in here from the other CEO, how we're all about building trust. And I'm like, this entire article is bullshit. My co-founder left and like just went to work for them and did their Canadian expansions. So that company just dissolved. Is basically what happened.
More than anything, this is about trust. Build a good relationship with us. That's really funny. Oh my gosh, what a great story.
Yeah, so that's how I like this shit. I mean, honestly, I'll be real at this point. Like, I can't be mad because like I was so young, and
yeah,
my business partner was like 10 years older than me, and it's everyone. There's so many sides to every story.
Yeah, yeah,
But anyways, did that. Had just a lot of money to pay back from that.
yeah.
When you're 16 and someone writes you a $10,000 check like 2 days after you ask them, you feel personally obligated to sort of, pay them back. So went and worked for 2, 3, 4 years, did graphic design stuff, and then I did. I feel like I should mention I'm in Kelowna in Canada, which is like 3.5, 4 hours east of Vancouver.
Okay.
And then I worked for another startup in Kelowna. We did consulting on product development. Did that for 2 years, and that company imploded. An article about that. That was more of a shit show, but
Yeah.
that was a good time. And so now we are where we are.
That's really cool. That's very exciting. And so you're working on MedConnect and Flick right now. Those are your two main things.
Yeah, I'm so between all of those, like when I was working, even I had other projects on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Probably like 4 or 5 different things, sort of like what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Like clothing, I did tea, I did like such a lot of different things. And right now, sort of where I spend my time is I do a lot of product consulting for different startups or enterprises trying to bring ideas to market. And then I also have my own companies and projects. And so I spend a lot of time on MedConnect. And then I also am the fractional CTO at Flick.
Yeah.
I help build that product, lead that.
That's really, really cool. Awesomeness. And so Flick, I think I'm going to be interviewing one of the founders of Flick, and I'm not sure if you would be a founder of Flick or just the CTO. But regardless, one of the other people working on Flick, I think she's the CEO of it right now, Michelle Kwok. And if I'm pronouncing that right, but she seems super cool. We've had a couple of conversations.
She's unreal.
Yeah, she seems like a boss. Yeah.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, I think, and I can go look it up right now. Flick. Let's see if we can find it. Flick Hospitality, Flickr. We are Flick. Okay. We are Flick. That's what it is. But Flick, yeah. Okay, cool. So it's apprenticeships. It's kind of like an incubator for apprenticeships for entrepreneurial women getting into, apprenticeship each other. Yeah.
Essentially for like, ambitious young females that want to have apprenticeships with female founders or female leaders that are just killing in business. It's a lot of building relationships and giving access to people that never had access to mentorships with individuals that had similar narratives or stories as them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's a really, really cool platform. With,
That's awesome.
Just incredible talent on there right now.
That's really fun. I was actually, speaking of women who are absolutely killing it, I was talking to Emily Kennedy. I don't know if you've seen her before. I was just talking to her a second ago. Let me drop you down here. Just a quick side tangent. Right before I hopped on the call here, I had a little 20-minute call with her. Ooh. Oh, cool. I was just followed on Twitch by COVID-19. Wow, the topicality. I wonder who that is. Emily Kennedy. That's ridiculous. Somebody's memeing hard. Anyway, so Emily Kennedy, entrepreneur, Forbes 130. She's so cool. She has a podcast where she interviews some really impressive people, and what I really love is she was telling me she's been ranked in a bunch of different ways. Things are going really good for her. She has a really huge reputation, but one of the things that I really like is she's using entrepreneurship for social good. She's mainly focused on fighting human trafficking, building a tech company that fights human trafficking. She's so cool. Oh my gosh. But she was giving me some advice on speaking. And actually, before I get into more of the questions, one of my friends dropped a little comment. Scott dropped a little comment and says, "You need to do a speaking tour. Talk to this guy about it." Have you done any speaking gigs? Because I'm just trying to get into speaking as part of a thing.
Yeah, I've done a decent amount of speaking at this point. Minus, it's a dog that's come to love me.
Minus.
Yeah,
That's a cool
I've done a fair bit of speaking at this point. It's never something I've pursued as an additional sort of career at this point. I sort of do when it comes up. But I've done. I'm trying to remember what I've done now. I did a decent amount last year. Whether it was through my own events or I did Startup Weekend or Startup Week in Vancouver. I've done
Yeah.
Startup Canada. There's a lot of different sort of events like that. So Tech Vancouver, things like a lot of like Vancouver-based things, a lot of like League of Innovators stuff as well. Speaking super fun. I really enjoy it, and it's something that um, I'm working on like pursuing more as well.
Yeah.
It's the time thing for me right now.
Yeah, I totally get you. It sounds like you're working on a ton. Um, but yeah, so I'm definitely also trying to get into that space. I really don't have much of an earthly clue besides like emailing conferences and getting in touch with people that are doing like entrepreneurship education is the place that I work, and that's most where most of my content lies, right? And I have like I'm not some big fancy successful entrepreneur, but I know how kids learn entrepreneurship, and I know how people learn entrepreneurship because I've been
Yeah.
teaching it for like 2 years. And so I like that's kind of my little niche, and so I just looked up like entrepreneurship education conferences, and I found like a list of like 15, and I'm gonna like try to email them. And beyond that, I really can't think of too much. I think Emily was giving me advice on like create a pamphlet, like create like a PDF of like here are the three
Yeah.
things that I'm really great at speaking at. But beyond that, yeah, no, I'm still figuring out the process.
I think it's a lot of that. Reaching out to organizations, all the unpaid gigs, and starting with that, making sure you film everything,
Yeah.
put a reel together. I have a friend of mine putting together, so I have like endless hours of footage at this point of me speaking, and so I'm gonna like pick parts, and a friend of mine's gonna throw it together. It's gonna have like a speaking reel. I'm doing a one pager, and they're gonna have those online or send those to people, and then also reach out with those. When you have like a speaking reel and you have the one pager, it's a lot more of like you seem more legit as well,
Yeah.
instead of like and for me the big thing is I'm super apprehensive to position myself as an expert. I think too many people do that, and too many people are pursuing trying to be an expert. I feel like your narrative, your story has enough value for somebody, especially when they're starting.
Yeah.
You don't need to hear from the most successful because their mind's in an entirely different place.
Yeah.
And so I think sort of, yeah, not trying to pursue the expert, depends which way you go. Some people have too much confidence, some people have not enough. Because I think a lot of people confuse humility and confidence.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just having, knowing the value you bring. You're not always a teacher, sometimes you're a student, and always being teachable while also sort of knowing the value you bring.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I the goal is not to position myself as an expert. The goal is just to position myself as like I've been trying this for a very long time, and I've realized like I've bumped into a lot of different places, and so I feel like I can educate on it to some degree. But I'm very much still learning.
That's a big thing. It's like I try and just like I literally just practice when I'm doing nothing else. Just like how to re-articulate the same phrases.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always thinking of different different ways to phrase like the my tagline or my elevator pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, even just like, and there's a lot of ways. Even like the words you use.
Yeah.
If it's something people have to think about, it sounds more profound.
Interesting. That's a good point. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I could come up with a lot of examples for you.
That's actually that's kind of a if it like that phrase in itself is actually a good example of how the phrase works.
Or like, humility and confidence are mutually exclusive. You have to take 2 seconds.
It takes 2 seconds. Yeah.
Versus humility and confidence aren't the same thing. Or humility and confidence aren't at opposition of each other. Like, humble and confident. Another like simple way to phrase it.
Interesting.
When you think about it, you leave room for pause. People are like,
oh wow, shit, yeah. The wisdom. That's funny. I love that. Awesome. That's super cool. Yeah, no, and I would love to follow up and maybe like share some pieces back and forth, and if we either of us figure out some stuff about speaking. But I would love to, because like the goal is to like fund myself full time doing entrepreneur eventually in like the next few years. That would be amazing. I don't need to make a ton of money with it. I just want to like be able to sustain myself so I can travel, I can meet new people, I can do little stints here and there, and just kind of build an actual community. But don't need to get paid a ton. But like the ways that I'm thinking of doing that are, one, starting a Patreon. Who knows how that'll work? That's very complicated for creators. And then two, speaking gigs. So and then also I just got my first actual company sponsorship, which I'm extremely excited about. Yeah, it's like just like $100 a month. But we're still in conversations about it, but it should be good. But yeah, it's really exciting. I'm really excited about it. So we'll figure it out. Yeah. So cool. Without further ado, let's dive into some questions. So explain to me kind of like your methodology around customer discovery, because you do this for other people, right? You find people that want to dive into a niche. You find like corporate groups or individuals or whoever it is, and you can explain more on that, that want to start something and they don't know if it's a good idea, they don't know if it's a risk, and they want somebody to be able to go out and figure out whether or not it is, right? And I'm not sure, you kind of do that both with MedConnect and with Flick. You kind of explained to me, but I would love kind of an analysis on like how you do that, like how you like make this a client-facing thing, how you make this a service.
Absolutely. So I think it's some clarities. Like I started as a designer and developer, so I was on a lot of teams, and I think in the last 5 years I've built almost 15 different products.
You got a lot of product experience, yeah.
Yeah, so that's building a lot, and most of them have gone nowhere.
Yeah.
And so when you spend a lot of time, a lot of energy and potential into a lot of different products, you reach a point where it's like there's got to be a better way to like increase the possibility of success, increase your odds. And so this is by no means my methodology. Over the last 5 years, crafted and adjusted a lot between like a handful of people I work with pretty consistently. And we sorry, the dog keeps like
Yeah,
the
you're
dog
good.
is like, it doesn't love me this much, but it's actually hanging out with me, and I'm really confused. It's a very one-sided relationship.
Yeah.
My roommate's not home, that's really well.
A couple weeks ago, just to quickly interrupt, I think like two weeks ago, my girlfriend's parents were in town and they brought their dogs and they didn't want to like keep them at like a kennel or anything like that, and so the dogs were staying at my place. Look at that pooch. Oh, look at that little pupper. That's very cute. What is his name? Minus?
Linus, look this way. There you go.
You're on the air, Linus.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
You're not happy.
But my girlfriend's two dogs and her family's two dogs were over here, and the entire time I was streaming, one of them just wanted a lot of attention, and so she was just going like the whole time, and I had to lift her up and pet her that while I was doing the live stream. It was very funny.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, my background. So product development, built a lot of different products.
A lot of product development. A lot of it didn't go anywhere, but through that you learned from a lot of different people how customer discovery kind of functions. Yeah.
Yeah, so sort of like it brought up the question like how do we increase the likelihood of success on any of these products? And so it often always tends to go back to, should we build this? So there's a lot of assumptions when you build any sort of product, and it's one of the assumptions is people want this, or people will pay for this, or this provides value,
Mm-hmm.
or the assumption is we can build it. Odds are, in 2020, regardless of your idea, we can build it.
Yeah.
Things
It's very probable.
Might take time. Like there's a very few things you have to be very creative to think of things that we can't build. But like the majority of things, that's never tends to be the blocker. And
Yeah.
so starting new projects, whether it's MedConnect, whether it's Flick, there are some other companies that I helped build over the last 2 years that it's still on my LinkedIn, but I'm not. It's a whole other story that I don't have time to get into. But
I love how much you got going
I
on.
co-founded a company that visualizes financial strategies for asset replacement for cities. I've learned more about municipal financial strategy, asset replacement, and all these things than I ever thought I would in my life.
Yeah.
So that company was projected to do about $600K this year.
That's awesome.
But is now having co-founder issues, so is disappearing entirely.
Yeah.
But that project as a whole is one of my biggest case studies of this whole process.
Yeah.
Because we were able to do over 200K without writing a line of code by just positioning things as a consulting thing instead of a software.
Yeah.
To validate our value propositions and validate the problem.
Whether people actually needed it. Yeah, I gotcha. That's wild.
And so how we approach it, I sort of break down so sort of the idea of like there's a build, measure, learn. I don't know if you've read The Lean Startup or not.
I've read a little bit of it.
It's a great book. I read it probably twice a year just because every time I read it I rethink of like, oh yeah, I think of a different project. Like I'm literally like, reading it right now, and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about MedConnect and Flick. This isn't. Let's do it back to back, I think. Um, but yeah, so essentially, you go through this cycle to build, measure, learn, and the whole idea is like, how can we maximize the art of work not done?
Yeah.
And it's the idea of just not being lazy, but being efficient and not wasting human potential or human energy,
Hmm.
or human capital, essentially, uh, because that's devastating. You work 5 years on something and it goes nowhere. Sure, you learn a lot. You can write it off of like, I can find value in this time, but it's not something where you're like, yo, that was great.
Yeah.
Um, and so we really set out to like, how do we build stuff now that we have this skill set to build anything, uh, and build the right things. And that really comes down to not starting with an idea, but starting with a problem. And so a lot of people will start with ideas,
Yeah.
uh, and rightfully so, because you saw a problem, you looked at it, you iterated in your mind, you came up with something, you're like, this is the solution. And what people tend to do is go out and build it, put it into the market, and adjust. Now
Yeah.
that works, that's fine. But when you go out to market, within you can already iterate. So it's like, how can we shorten the iteration span? Not how can we waste more time analyzing, but how do we shorten iteration spans?
Yeah.
And so how we approach that now is we have a 5-step process. We call it the 5D framework: um, discovery, define, design, develop, deploy.
I like it a lot. The 5Ds.
And like that name has been used by other organizations as well. It's funny. One of my friends that I work a lot on with products, he came from a big sort of organization where he did a lot of consulting for a lot of different companies, from FedEx, AT&T, BlackBerry, Cisco. Like he's been around.
That's
He's done
awesome.
so many things. He's one of my mentors when it comes to engineering. And we were going through this process. I'm like, yo, we should call it the 5D framework. He's like, that's really funny because that's what these guys also called it. So by no means is this original. There is probably something that was created and we just adapted everything we've learned.
Yeah.
And so really what this means is, this is actually how I set up our product roadmap in MedConnect and Flick. Is I have these 5 columns, and then we do everything in sprints as well. But essentially anything that, and there's also like in our Asana or Trello, there's like an inbox column where people like jot down ideas or problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
But essentially in discovery, what I enforce is, if you put something into discovery in that column, it has to be a question. It can't be, for example, with Flick, it's like a lot of people are like, we should build chat, so they throw chat in there. I'm like, no, that's not a problem, that's a solution.
Yeah.
I want to know what the problem is. And so if you can't tell me the problem that your ideal feature is going to solve, we're not going to build it
Then don't pop it on there. Yeah, I gotcha.
at all. And so how do we provide a more cohesive experience in the onboarding of apprenticeships? That's the question. And you might be like, this is regarding chat. But then we take that question and we go back to founders and we go back to apprentices or whoever it impacts, and we ask them, so what's your experience with this? How are you enjoying this? Another example with MedConnect is, um, we've hosted roundtables where we had 4 or 5 physicians at a time. We'd sit down, record it, and we'd just chat. And so there's 2 parts. It's different when it's existing and different when it's new. The questions are very different, but the whole idea of discovery is, how do I get to the right question?
Yeah.
And if you have experience or you spent, a decade in the industry, I don't view that as you know what to build. I view it as you know better what questions to ask. You know how to
Yeah.
speak the language.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, so that's sort of discovery. And then define is breaking down the question into user stories. So that's really defining, what are we building very clearly. And so I view each stage: define, design, develop, and deploy. Each of those to me is something we can release to a certain number of our clients. And so in the case of MedConnect, or in the case of your city as well, what we sort of did is we had these like questions. We're like, so we have a hunch that we're working off of. I'm like, I think this is a problem. So then we have conversations, and we probably had, with your city, we have 2 products. The the first has 3 major iterations of code, and in design, I think I had 40 different iterations,
Woof.
and in define, like in conversation, we had hundreds.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, because every time you have a conversation with one person, like, oh, what about this, and you go to someone else, and you build it up in your mind, you sort of define the problem and the solution, and then you go to design, you bring that in front of them, and then they see it. Some people aren't able to like visualize it. They see it, they can click through it, like, oh, what about this, so we like do that. So I had honestly added 2-hour conversation about just one graph, like
Interesting.
literally about just the debt servicing capacity for a city,
Yeah.
how that is contextualized and like, absurd, like way too much time. And so we went over and over and over and over and over it, and now we're at a point. I'm just gonna close my door because
No, you're good. You're good. Go for it. Ooh. Heard a pup yowling.
homes. So Linus is excited. Um, and yes, we take this problem, and then we want to ask, like, what are solutions? We ask, what about this solution? What about this? And then we'll begin to take that, design it, bring it back, reiterate on it. Go back to design, go back and forth. And so, for your city, we talked to, I think, 40 or 50 different cities. And our CEO had a lot of experience, and he was a civic engineer for decades. So he knew all the people, he was in the industry, he knew the questions, he knew the language, and we were able to take our product experience and leverage that. And so we managed to, on this process, we went through all of this, and then we took, of all the cities we talked to, about 12 and put them on a product advisory council. And so very strategic, they're early adopters, they're willing. Some of them aren't even clients, they're just down to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
We worked with them, we bring our iterations not to everyone at mass or at scale, but we bring it to them. And then we had, of that PAC, we'd have like 1 or 2 people we worked really closely with, that we had very small, like very intimate sort of loops with our iterations. What do you think about this? What about this position? What about this? And that was almost every other day sort of thing. People that were like, again, not compensated, but just down to help. And then once we do that for a week or 2, then we bring in once a month for the whole council, get their feedback. And if there's not any big red flags, then we could begin to proceed with development, depending on sort of how we progress. If they're like, we could check that box.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That makes sense. So it's a very, very iterative process. That's really interesting. And that makes sense. In terms of like, that's a pretty like solid walkthrough of the client process. But let's say like right in the beginning, like when somebody comes to you new, right, and they want your help. They want that. Like you've talked to cities, you've talked to other individuals. Let's say, I don't know, like what are some clients that you typically work with? So you work with cities. Are there other like, do you work with corporate groups? Do you work with individuals? Like what's the typical, if there is anything typical?
Yeah, so it depends on the project. So
Yeah.
Some projects that I have right now, I either oversee product or I oversee design or oversee development. So and if I'm just development, I'm not product, then I'll give recommendations, but it's not my place.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
So I'll use Flick as an example. So Michelle and Ravina, good friends of mine, and they had this idea, and I was like, this is super cool. Obviously, I personally have this issue as well. I'm an underrepresented female, as that's very evident. No, so it's like it's interesting because it's not something that I personally felt.
Yeah.
It's not even something I necessarily saw.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't see it doesn't mean it's not real.
Exactly.
It doesn't exist. And so with that, for example, they had the idea, like, we should build this. I'm like, I disagree. I don't think we should build this. I think we should spend this time, have these conversations. They're like, no, we're positive. I'm like, it's just small enough for me to be willing to build it, to have the leverage to be able to say, I told you so.
Yeah.
And so we built it. I just built the first version. It was small enough where I'm like, this is only a couple weeks. Like I can throw this together. And so we did
couple
that,
weeks just to say I told you so. Yeah, I like it.
Well, it all came together, and then people are like, well, people asked about this. I'm like, we would have discovered that. What product is now? How
That's
do we
funny.
upsell? And so every time
I love
something
the
will come up,
sass.
they'll be like, "Yo, we should add this. This person said this." I'm like, if we would have spent, because we spent no time in design even, and like the design of Flick right now is like, as I'm building, I'm like, this should probably look good. Excuse me, which is not how I recommend designing.
Yeah.
And so now I actually took a bit of time to redesign one of the interfaces, and they're like, "Oh shit, this is so dope! Like this is really cool." I'm like, "We could have had this already," and it's like we could have built the best experience if we would have taken the time. And so now it's begun to be like now they understand the value because to go back and rework some of this is now there's technical debt. But had we taken a few hours in the beginning, mapped it out, we wouldn't have that issue now. I
Exactly.
mean, and I knew this was going to happen, so the technical debt isn't bad because I was like, anticipating most of these changes.
Yeah.
Um, but it was very similar to that sort of aspect where until you've built a lot of products and wasted a lot of time, you think, let's just build it and see what the market says.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, I agree. What does the market say? But what you show them. So instead of building what people call an MVP, we in our sort of group we call it an MVP. So the most valuable minimum viable product, and that can change. So Dropbox, for example, their MVP was a video. They were able to visualize the example of how Dropbox would work. But their interesting thing was they were working with a problem people didn't know they had.
Yeah.
So they're trying to get people to pay for something they didn't know they wanted to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And so something like Flick is kind of similar, but it's a problem a lot of people have. And MedConnect, for example, what we're working on now um, is sort of in the charting and triaging aspects of healthcare and alternative care, where it's a problem a lot of people sort of know they have, but are they willing to change? And so it has to be much better, but can I communicate how much better it'll be and validate that problem in a conversation, in a mock-up, or in a prototype where you can click around, but it's not like it might be actual code, but there's no back end to it.
Yeah. It
Where
doesn't. Yeah.
so yeah, so a friend of mine built something for FedEx where they track packages and they have like IoT in each package that tracks like temperature and movement and pH levels and just anything you can imagine. And so instead of them spending millions of dollars building this IoT, they just built the interface, the dashboard, and showed that to their CEO. And he's like, "This is cool. Here's more money." So the level of MVP differs depending on whom you're selling to.
Exactly.
And if they're more early adopters, then you can usually get away with, as long as you can truly communicate your vision, which everyone's going to say, we need to build the whole, you don't. You don't need to build the whole thing. Like, what's the most valuable minimum viable product?
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. The way that I do these things again, I focus on small form entrepreneurship. I focus on usually very small problems or very niche problems that likely only function into lifestyle businesses or something more local that just can be something fun that somebody can sustain. But in those kinds of conversations, like I was talking to a bunch of thrift stores locally, and a lot of them are having issues with advertising, getting people into the stores because there really wasn't any kind of place to find that. And each independent one doesn't have enough money or resources to hire out somebody to do marketing, right? It's very, but it requires stuff like that. And so I was working and I realized I was solving the wrong problem later. But the point is, like, when I'm doing little investigations in new products, when I'm doing these market tests, like these minimum viable products, right? Usually what my strategy is to just set up a quick little landing page that edits that kind of shows like, here's what the product is, this is what it's called, neat little fake logo, here's how it works, here's the problem that it solves, here's a little button that says, hey, buy this for $1. They click on the buy now button and it leads them to a page like, hey, actually we're not done with it yet, but we'd love some feedback on what you want to see, and they fill out a form where they show some interest, right? That's the typical kind of minimum viable product that I've seen used in a couple different methods, and then you just push some Facebook ads to it and see if you get any bites. Are there other kind of like small little processes that you've seen? Like the video is a great one, but I would love to get really, really fluent at all these little tiny versions of minimum viable products to get good at testing ideas.
So the one you're referring to is it's sort of like the smoke screen test is what they call it.
Yeah.
Is can we get something where people are interested in, can we get them to convert online? And so it really depends on who you're targeting, for sure. So your city
It usually should be like probably more consumer applications or things like that, consumer products.
Yeah, I mean, consumer or not, it just depends how big the market is. If you
Yeah.
can target them well enough, you can target B2B as well using ads. So as long as there's enough people,
Yeah.
um, and often what you're testing at that point is more language than you are problem. And so it's really easy to. So that's where I'm a big fan of the like um, leveraging sort of like, excuse me, leveraging conversations because I can go in depth and really understand the nature of the problem. So something your city did is through these conversations, we discovered cities don't like to buy software at all. Um, and so as soon as we said, hey, this is consulting and your report is digitally delivered, they're like, let me give you money. We created a new process of how they view or consider infrastructure management, and how they view asset replacement. And so in this process, we're able to generate actual revenue through consulting. Then we build software to automate. Um, that's sort of one way. And the other thing that uh, we're doing at MedConnect right now.
Sorry, I'm just commenting.
It's been around almost 2 years now.
Oh, yeah.
We built a product that we have absolutely no use for and are trying to actually like sell,
Hmm.
because it didn't work at this point. But there's a lot of IP that I've built at this point. So what we're doing now is we're literally going back to square one, and this is interesting because I always position MedConnect as essentially just a company that builds tools for physicians with physicians.
Yeah.
And so in conversations like this is, I mean, there's a lot of different MVPs, right? The MVP is meant to test your riskiest assumption. And so you have to define of the list of assumptions. I think the lean startup defines it as like Eric Ries defines it as the leap of faith assumption. So like if this one fails, everything fails. And so you have to define what that is. Is it generally, are people willing to pay for this? Can we build it? Is this the right idea? And the thing is, when you just build something and throw it out there, you might be right. And if you're right, you probably got lucky.
Yeah.
I don't want anything off of luck.
Yeah.
Uh, I want to put my best foot forward and let luck fill in the gap.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't want to step onto luck.
Yeah.
And so I have a friend who's built a company. They're doing between 5 and 10K a month. He hasn't talked to a single customer, and he can't tell me why anyone's bought his product.
That's weird.
Like, this is great. You're making money. Now you have staff. I have concerns about the longevity of your business.
Yeah, yeah.
So what about when people just churn right away? Because you can see in the numbers a very high churn rate.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you need to discover why people are using your product and like double down on that. But they've built features, spent 2 months building something, released it, nobody used it, nobody wanted it. That's painful.
Yes.
That's hard to swallow. They thought it was the best idea ever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have in front of me, we have sort of a MedConnect. We've documented sort of how we approach the conversations aspect. If you want sort of in-depth, tangible.
That would be great. Yeah, I would love that. As much tangibility as possible.
So some high-level things. We prefer one-on-one settings
Yeah.
versus
Group interviews. Yeah, because then there's groupthink and somebody might say something and you might accidentally agree with it. Like the psychology of a one-on-one is much more honest. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the idea is especially in the healthcare space, there's a lot of hedging,
Yeah.
respect, and peer. Like there's a lot of these like ego and things. The other part is, so we do that. We try and do per individual. It's not always reasonable. So, I mean, we were able to get a group session funded where the physicians got paid by the government to show up to a catered event that we got the benefit from. Healthcare is really weird. But I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
And so the other thing we do, sort of like some other theses we have, is we draw boundaries. We really clearly say, you're the expert here. I'm the expert in product development. You know, this is a line in the sand. This is what we've done to sort of show our credibility. You guys have decades of experience.
That's a really good point.
Problems are. The other one is chocolate broccoli. So it's the idea of you know, we're the idea is like to give people what they need covered and what they want.
Interesting.
So
It's like the vitamin versus the painkiller kind of argument, right? Like you want to be the painkiller. You want people to think that you're the painkiller that solves their problem right now and just gets it done, instead of the vitamin that would solve their pain over time, and it's the right thing to do, but it's not as instantaneous, right? You don't want to be what they should do. You want to be what they want.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of it. I like that analogy as well. But it's more of like some people have things they want, some things they need,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to be what they want. You want to be what they need covered and what they want.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's tough.
And so the other thing is the important thing to do is, like, if you're innovating, you have to remember to focus on early adopters and innovators. It's really easy to get super discouraged when you talk to people where they just think you're dumb. But you know, the thing is, which is great.
Just think you're dumb. That's
That is
funny.
discouraging.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, but the important thing is also, like, that we found is, like, talking to everyone, taking all the feedback, and knowing, do they have the latest version of iOS? And like, what are they using? Do they have an Apple Watch? Like, how are they doing all these things? And going to them being an adopter. If you're an early adopter, you're an early adopter. And so that helps us know who we're actually targeting in our market, but also it helps us know what the objections of the crossing that chasm is. I mean, there's a great book called Crossing the Chasm, which I recommend. It's very dry, but it's really, really great. And the other thing is, then we find early adopters that we really jive with, that we put onto our product advisory council. All right, the next sort of thesis is broad and narrow. So about, I'm just going to read this, about half the conversation needs to be focused on the broad parts of their lives, practices, and processes. The second half needs to be narrowly focused on one topic. This can vary based on the current product theme, corporate strategy, and the hypothesis that's being tested. During the broad portion, you may begin to notice a trend of other narrow verticals where you might find value in diving down. Follow instinct here. Make sure you have the ability to complete the narrow dive on at least one vertical.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, we view it as all right. Is that the clarity, or is that clear?
No, yeah, that makes sense. I think the way that I'm kind of interpreting that is, like, when I go in to do, like, I was talking to some thrift stores locally when I was doing that, and the conversation that I had like a 2-hour conversation, and I asked, like, tell me all about the entire business. For the next, like, half hour, I want you to, like, walk me through the business if you're down with it, and show me everything that you're dealing with, every single process, how the clothes come in, how you sort them, how you put them on the racks, like, just everything from product creation to sale, right? Just walk me through the entire business. And then from there, if we kind of identify problems, and if I can see that you're struggling with certain things, you narrow dive deeper into that. And one of the issues that they kept repeating in my first interview, which ended up being the wrong issue, but it was still a good deep dive, was that they had a lot of trouble advertising to customers, and they had a lot of trouble getting people in. And they ended up having, like, they needed more clothes on the shelves, and if they had more clothes on the shelves, more people would come in. But they also, like, when it was an advertising problem. It seemed like an advertising problem, and so I deep dived on that. What are your current, like, ways? You put up flyers. Is there anything else? No. And you leave room for that deep dive when they complain about something, and when they start complaining about something, you want to know why and how long they've been dealing with this, what their current solutions are. But you want to always, no matter if you're diving deep on something already, you want to leave that room open for those broader conversations in case you're accidentally hitting the wrong problem, or there are other things that influence the problem that you're too narrowly deep diving on.
Yeah, and so I've like an actual, like, list of questions we go through to, like, differentiate broad and narrow. But the main thing is, we discovered now the product we're working on now in all our other discoveries, because it kept coming up. And so whenever we'd ask, and the question I literally ask is tell me about your life. Like, what does a day in the life of look like?
Interesting.
And they'll be like, well, I'm at the office. And no. You just, like, wake up at the office and, like,
you just wake up at the office?
I wonder the context your mind's in. So he's like, well, I wake up, I go to the bathroom, like, I get my kids ready, we have breakfast, I take them to school, I do this, I go to the office. I'm like, cool, you've gone through all of this already, and now you're starting your day. That just provides, because we're all humans, right? Like,
it provides context. I get you. I like that.
And so then we'll go through and, like, and we'll get to the actual questions that explains the broad and narrow. in a little bit. The other thesis is seek to understand. We want to learn about their processes, the intent and purpose behind this, how they approach things, how they test other options. Why are they settled on this? Are they unmotivated to change? Why not? This is a good area to remember, good time to remember the 5 levels of why created by Toyota. Ask why 5 times to sort of get to the root cause. Learn about their life. We start questions generic about their life and practice when they wake up. What are the first few things you do? What are the major areas of your life and practice? Once you begin down this rabbit hole, keep track of time. It's easy to like spend hours talking about this. Just ask someone on the bus or the train, tell me about your life. Where do you spend your time in your life? And you can like start a conversation easy that way. But that gives you an idea at the high level. And then narrow questions. Excuse me. At this point, we want to focus down on a few key areas in particular we're interested in. I'm going to skip that part. Potential. So yeah, that we have going into a conversation. I think this is the problem I want to solve. So we have an intent behind it. At this point, we do. Once they're like structured discovery conversations, we want to that we might leave further, but we know what we want to talk about, and that's where the narrow comes in. I want to go deep on their experience and this problem, and so I spend the bulk of the conversation there. Is this a problem for them? If so, what are they using? How do they approach it? What's the process? What have they tried? How much time do they spend here? When? Who does this well? What have they tried? Is this an important tool for them? You know, is there a magic wand that they wish they could wave to solve it? How?
I've heard the magic wand one. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a product advisory council. So while we're having conversations, if we vibe with them, the early adopters, they sort of get us, and there's a good ebb and flow. We'll request them later to be in a product advisory council, which tends to be an hour once a month, or a half hour to an hour once a month to go over what we've iterated on. All right, the actual process. Like I have actual questions that I go through. Number one, major business areas. Wow.
Major business areas. Okay.
What are the major areas of your business? Walk me through your day. So this is sort of the highest level. We're trying to get an understanding of how and where they draw the lines around the areas of their business.
Gotcha. So how they segment things.
Kind of 4 to 8 different parts of the business.
Okay.
And then number 2, and this is where like exponentially gets like more intense. So you can ask all these questions about every area of business. Of all these areas, where do you spend the most time? That's a really good indicator of where there's a process that can be automated or a problem that can be solved. So
I love that.
Which areas have the biggest impact on each practice, and then we should try to figure out like what's the current process that they use in that area of business. Walk me through how you do. See, this is sort of what you did, right? You sort of said, walk me through how you bring in this, how you put them in the racks, how they get sold, how they get sorted, all those things.
Yeah.
Very weird. And then the thing is, everything's a process, intentional or not. And so trying to figure out what the process is. I try and push past the question, the answer, like we've always done it this way. Why? Like somebody's got to know why.
Yeah.
Like, there's a team I lead, and we're growing our team and added more locations, and now I'm overseeing a bunch more people. And as I was combining our teams, I said, we all do the same thing, but I don't care how we do anything. I really don't.
Yeah.
I want to know that there's a reason or intent. So if there's something you do and you don't know why you do it, let's talk about it, because we're not going to do that. I'd rather you have no reason. I don't care if we keep doing it. I need to know why we're doing it. I want to make sure everything's intentional. And then the other part is sort of like, what are the problems and attempted solutions? So it's like major areas of business, time, process, problems, and attempted solutions. So like within, let's say your major area of business, you have this process. What are the issues you're running into? So I'm trying to think of the thrift store, a major area of business would probably be their sorting facility. I would imagine.
Yeah.
You have a process that when clothes come in, this is what we do. What are issues you're running into here? What are some things that aren't ideal? Um, have you attempted to solve this? If they haven't attempted to solve the problem, is it a real problem?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's easy to say no, but on the flip side, no one's really tried to solve Dropbox's problem until Dropbox did. But that's rare. It's a lot more rare than if like I'm actively Googling for this. Right?
Yeah.
Because if you search for what people are Googling for in their business, you're essentially you're jumping to step 4, and it's like right there.
Yeah, yeah. You tried to solve. I like that. Have you tried to solve the problem? If not, it might not be an actual problem. I like that. It's a good distinction.
You want to take my money. You want to be the person that has a fire truck when their house is burning down.
Yeah, you want, like, the way that I always phrase it is like, you want to go into a customer interview, you want to ask a few questions, and then hear something that they literally just get angry about. Like, they're so like, you want them to rant to you and just bitch to you about, like, oh my god, this kills me every single day, every single week. This is just a nightmare for me. That's what you really want to hear.
And the important thing there is not to take their solution as gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone's gonna come up with like, oh, this is what we need to do. That's great. You're now just a case study of one. And I always say, if you have this problem, other people also need to have this problem. Otherwise, I'm helping you. We're not building a product, or creating a market, or discovering a market. And so it's if other people have this problem. You might all have the same problem with a bunch of different potential solutions. And the more we get into the root problem, the more effectively we can actually solve these problems.
I like that a lot, yeah. And we kind of had that a little discussion on that in comments, I think, yesterday. You made a post. It's absolutely true. Like, that was a really, really good distinction, because I wasn't thinking about what that. I was being a little bit general with my comment, but yes, you are the expert. I like that distinction that you go in with. Like, I'm the expert on product, you're the expert on the problem, right? Like, just because like I know how to build something to solve issues, but you know what the issue is, and that's how we're gonna work together. I really like assuming that. I like that assumption.
And then I really like, they'll have if it's a real problem, they'll provide some solutions. What are the pros and cons? Are you still using them? Why not? Like, then I'm just actually curious.
Yeah.
Is it not too expensive? Not efficient enough? What is it? The perception? All these different things. I want to know what the issues are that they face for every process. And once you have a sort of defined list of validated problems. Now, if I have get to the end of a conversation, this is like 45, 50 minutes in, we're like nearing the end. All sort of have cool, I know this is now a problem for them, and I want to stack a bunch of those documents. I take verbatim notes in these meetings. Got the conversation, then I'll take them and be like, cool, now I'm more comfortable going to an investor being like, this is the problem we're solving. These are the other problems we see, potential things we can build. This is the real problem.
Yeah.
Right now.
How many interviews do you usually take into a certain industry or into a certain problem before you know, or your confidence just in your expertise that it is a problem? Because I've heard 50, I've heard 100, I've seen people who have done 10. What is if there is a number?
I don't know if there's a magic number.
Yeah, I don't think there is, but
I think at some point you'll feel confident. For me, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about healthcare.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And so I need to over-index on this to increase my confidence. So I need a lot. I want to have between 100 and 250 just to be like, cool, this is a real problem. Because here's the other thing with what we're looking at. Say we talk to 250 people and we get 50% conversion, which is a little high. So it's 125 people. If we can build a right product with what we're looking at, that puts us at over decently into the 6 figures a year in revenue off the bat, just based on, now I also have relationships with these people.
Exactly, yeah. These are going to be your future customers, yeah.
No, they're gonna be my future customers. They'll be my ambassadors. They're my product council. There'll be people that feel invested. There'll be people that feel like they're cutting edge. If they're early adopters, are like, oh, I'm down. This is great. They'll feel like they can really move the needle.
Yeah.
And so it's great. It takes time
Yeah.
and discipline to do it, but once you know the questions in the industry, that helps a lot. And then we end with uh, a on now you have all these problems, right? You've gone through all of this, and we our final step, we call it the four forces. And again, we didn't create this. This was a something we grabbed from some other people that we iterate on. And essentially, there's the four parts. There's the frustrations, fears, wants, aspirations, and this really just speaks to the marketing language. It informs the language we use. So the frustrations, the questions like, what are your greatest frustrations related to this problem?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have enough customers, but that's not a great problem. Why don't you have enough customers? Once you get, all right, we don't have enough people coming in the door. Why aren't people coming in the door? Well, we should ask them, but we can probably assume there's not enough stuff they want to see. Why do you not have enough? Why do you not have enough stuff? Because people aren't donating. Oh, so we need to increase donations,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
So it's like,
It gets to the root of the problem. Yeah.
related to increasing donations or the lack of donations. So that's a problem, and we'll answer that. And then we'll go like, if you can't increase the donations and that problem remains unsolved, what's your greatest concern in regards to your career about that problem?
Interesting.
And then what other fears you have about, your in relation to your career in general. So those are things that really inform your landing page now, where you can be like, you can speak to that fear or evoke that emotion and immediately answer it. Be like, do you have this fear? So I found physicians are worried about charting because they're worried about legal ramifications because they don't have the time to properly chart. A doctor literally told me, this blows my mind. He's like, one of my patients broke his arm. I wrote his chart 4 days later. I don't remember if it was his left arm or his right arm. I have no idea.
Wow.
I'm like, that's insane.
Yeah.
There's ways we could be able to solve that. And then it's wants. A year from now, describe your perfect situation. In regards to sort of this, like, describe your perfect situation related to, people aren't donating. What is a year from now? You're like, I don't know. You have a 10x increase or 50% increase in donations. Great.
Yeah.
That's ideal. Now, if you could wave the magic wand, what would it be? Like, if you could do anything, what would you want to see? And then, my favorite question, and I always end with this, because it leaves everyone feeling very introspective, which is one of my favorite moods, is, you're 85, and you're sitting with your grandchildren or your best friend's kids and your own kids. What's the story you want to be able to tell them about your career?
Ooh. I like that.
And then people, it doesn't generally lead to a whole lot. It just leads to them really thinking about what the fuck do I want?
Yeah. I like that a lot.
And so that has informed marketing language because generally it's very altruistic. It's like,
Yeah.
I actually want to change the world. Well, the reason I'm in medicine is this. It's so it gives them an opportunity to remind themselves why they're doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives me the opportunity to remind them, and then I can use that language as well. If that's consistent enough across all these individuals, then I'm able to really be like, is this what you want? You can begin. That's for marketing language. Then you take all this and you give it to marketers and let them run wild with all that. And like,
That's
I
awesome.
An iterative approach that the lean startup sets out, even in your marketing and every aspect of your business. Because again, the whole idea here is, how do we create the smallest iterative cycles that prove towards our value, like that increase our value and validate what we're trying to do.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So that's all awesome. And I really like that you went through the actual questions because that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. One thing that I would really love some advice on, the main thing, so I've tried to do customer discovery into like 10 different industries, and I've only managed to successfully for about like 3. And the reason for that is because like I don't know what it is. Like my conversion rate to get actual conversations, I usually cold email somebody and I'm like, hey, this is what I want to solve. I'm trying to help your business. I don't want to sell you anything, but I would love to talk to you about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I usually frame it as like, I'm a student, blah, blah, blah. I used to use my student email to do that all the time. And that worked sometimes, but I have had a shockingly difficult time actually getting in touch with people and like managing to start those in-person conversations. Because when I use most of these questions are very similar like alterations of these questions in my conversation. Like I understand the methodology and it seems like I have like a decent grasp on how it works, but I just rarely get the opportunity to because I'm just really, really shitty at making those conversions. Do you have like an email template or a method of outreach that you use really, really well to get all, because this is like 100, 200 interviews. That's a lot. That's a lot to keep track of, and that's a lot to have to set up. Like, what's your usual conversion rate, and how do you get that outreach started to make sure you get these interviews? Is it introductions or is it just cold?
It changes all the time.
Yeah, I would imagine it varies.
And so, I mean, there's another product I'm working on called Relation that I did all this. So when I have an idea, this is what I do. I design and I code, and sometimes I just want to build the idea, but I rather have the conversations. Like I have like a bunch of product ideas that I have validation and discoveries on sitting in my Notion account that I haven't touched because I'm like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And so,
speaking of Notion, I recently made a board. I recently discovered it, and it's like the most like pleasurable, enjoyable thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I love my Notion board. It's a great tool.
Amazing. Except I don't want to pay for it.
Yeah. Same, yeah.
This is the thing. It's so great, but it's not something I pay for.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm sure they're struggling with that. I want to talk to the founders of Notion so bad because I feel like they're like artsy as hell, first of all, just because of how the tool is built.
They're smart as hell from an engineering standpoint, but it's, you know what's interesting? Superhuman. I pay $30 a month for an email client. That seems so absurd, but I couldn't imagine life without it now. And like,
interesting.
I'm on day 3 right now.
Yeah.
It's that good.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I was recommending it to a couple of people. I've never used Superhuman, but I practice inbox zero, and I'm very, very aggressive about using my email as a to-do list. And I have I'm not like unbelievably busy. I have like a lot of free time, and I deliberately designed everything that way. But like with the time that I do spend, I do get a decent amount of emails, and I'm very, very aggressive in like a methodology for how to use my email. But I do want to try Superhuman. I've heard it's amazing.
It's the onboarding experience alone. Like,
interesting.
That product, it's the greatest product I've ever used in my life.
Interesting.
Like hands down. I mean, maybe my iPhone's better because it feels flawless too. But
maybe what is?
The iPhone's better.
Yeah, iPhone's really, really incredible at what it does.
It feels more like infrastructure than it does as a product.
Interesting. That's cool as hell. I gotta try it out. I gotta give it a shot. Yeah.
Highly recommend it. I think they're allowing everyone in now. They always say like when you request an invite, they're like, we're skipping you to the front of our 250,000 waiting list. I'm like, no, you aren't.
No, you're fucking alright. That's really funny.
So how do I convert? So
yes.
It's different in every case. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Part of the challenge is it's much easier with warm leads.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think the big thing I do. So MedConnect, for example, you will not find an email of a physician in BC online anywhere. I've spent countless hours. My team and I have spent countless hours looking.
Yeah.
Email is not an option.
Yeah.
It's not.
Interesting.
Not I don't want to call them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I just feel very apprehensive to wasting time like that.
Yeah.
And so we found there is just looking through the government structure. There's actually an organization that gets government funding that creates a bunch of. We've been involved with some of these before. It's called divisions of family practice in our case. And so my business partner was on the board of one of the divisions. We got some innovation funding from them, work with them. They can provide us introductions to any other organization or any other division as well. And so one of our solutions has been every physician we talk to trying to increase the, hey, can you recommend me to 2 people to talk to? Where it's like, what I'm going to talk to you about. I just want to help. I want to work with you to build products to make your life easier. And so warm intros, 100%. Like I will leverage my network to like do you know anybody that works in healthcare, alternative care, whatever it is? And that's so much easier. The other thing is, yeah, where are there groups of people? Where do these people hang out?
Yeah.
And I've never reached a point where it's like I haven't had success at all. And I
Interesting.
tend to find that sometimes there's limited success in getting them, but it really depends. Like that's why it's like easier to solve problems you have,
Yeah.
because if you have it, people that also have it. Um, and so yeah, I mean, with your city, um, it was just my co-founder, he spent 10 years in the industry. He
Yeah.
knew people
He
from
knew
coffee
people.
shops, have those relationships. Flick, Michelle and Ravina knew a bunch of people, but they have done the most appalling amounts of outreach. Because we've spent $0 on any sort of advertisement at this point. Everything's
Yeah.
been organic, and the growth has been absurd at this right now. And it's just been the amount of manual outreach. Like I had a meeting this morning with the CEO of an agency in Kelowna. They're the largest agency and news group in the central interior of BC, and so outside of Vancouver, they're the largest sort of company, or one of the largest companies. They're like, so Kelowna, I think for context, Kelowna has like under 200,000 people in it. It's pretty small. It's pretty cozy. A lot of wine and a lot of tech. Like we're talking like 300 vineyards.
Wow.
In like it's basically a lake in a valley with vineyards and tech.
That sounds like a dream.
It gets like 90 to 100 degrees in the summertime, and you're like, I'm 40 minutes from 4 different ski resorts.
That's
So
fuck.
you get all
That
4 seasons. You get
Where is
everything.
this place again? I want to move there. What is this?
Incredible. Search it up. Check out Google Kelowna, BC.
Kelowna, BC.
Aelowna.
Kelowna. He corrected me. Thank you, Google.
Images.
Yeah, images. Interesting.
So this is home.
Wow. Wow. Wow, yeah, it's just on a lake. That's pretty as hell.
Yo, it's gorgeous.
Fuck. This is nice. I like vineyards.
Yo, like, when I'm talking vineyards, I mean like almost 300 vineyards.
That's so funny.
Like Disney Studios Online is based in Kelowna, in Canada. Their Canadian headquarters.
Interesting.
For their online studios. Cause so have you ever heard of Club Penguin?
Yeah, I love Club Penguin.
That was from Kelowna.
Really?
Yeah, man.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yo, so I know the founders of Club Penguin.
That's fucking great.
They're the one company in Kelowna that was like the staple.
Yeah,
Disney
yeah.
bought them for like I think it was $350 or $750 million.
A lot, yeah.
Ridiculous amounts of money. Now they've reinvested, built more companies. Now there's actual angels here.
That's the reason there's tech there. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Club Penguin.
I met one of the founders, the original product designer or game designer, and we were talking. This was one of we were trying to raise money from them on my first company, and so I was like 16 or 17.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were talking about Club Penguin. I'm like, man, I love Club Penguin. He's like, you know Club Penguin? I'm like, bro, like I lived on Club Penguin. He's like, how old are you? He's like, were you born? I was like, I was born in 97. He's like, bro. He's like, man. He didn't say bro. He's like, yo. He also didn't say yo. He's like, that's when I started building Club Penguin, which is just wild. And so
That's insane.
yeah, so it's really cool. Like most people our age know Club Penguin, but this is where it's from.
That's fucking insane.
There were so little talent at that point that they went into like Starbucks and like hired any nice barista. They're like, we can teach you how to use our technology. We need your lovely humanness to be our support team.
That's awesome. Wow.
That's what spawned tech here, but
That's hilarious.
no idea why we got into that. This is why we got into that. Talking about Kelowna, context, Nikki. That's right.
Yes.
Back to Flick. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry. I got on a tangent. Thank you for bringing it back.
So there's Kelowna is the largest or most saturated news market in Canada. There's more
Interesting.
news outlets per capita in the Okanagan than there is in Toronto or Vancouver,
Hmm.
or Montreal or Calgary or Halifax. I don't know what other communities.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so they started a news organization as one of the most predominant ones. They're the largest agency in the area. So I was meeting with their CEO this morning, and another girl that's on the Flick platform had. This is why. Before I jumped there, they're bringing Gary Vaynerchuk to Kelowna. So like they're doing
Interesting.
substantial revenue right now to be able to afford that. They've been around
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years sort of thing. To a city that's not very big. So they have this big leadership conference, and so this girl that sort of spoke about Flick, she was one of the first people on the platform, and so I realized that when I looked to the back end, that the CEO of this company had actually signed up for Flick but not completed her registration. And I'm like, oh, interesting. So I knew I was meeting with her, so I was like, was like, hey, she's like, well, what are you working on? And I was like, oh, I'm working like part-time on this thing. And she's like, wait, I've heard of this.
Oh, really? Have it interesting.
How bizarre.
That's really funny.
Because I was like, I really want to know like how you discovered it. And it was just so like, I say all that to really bring across the point of like, a lot of these are one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And so like another product, we could chat at some point. So we're gonna do a big push soon. I think you'd actually be intrigued by it.
Would love to hear about it. Yeah.
It's basically how I approach those is like, if hypothetically, if we were to do a discovery on it right now, I'd be like, I'll tell you my idea after. I'm not protective of the idea. I don't want to sway you to thinking I have this solution.
Oh, yes. You never talk about the idea before you ask the questions. You talk about it at the end. Yeah.
I go through this process, and I have different particular questions for different products. And because I'll tell them the idea after, but I want to get like real insights.
Yeah.
I don't want people just being nice to me.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you present the idea, it's like, hey, I've been talking to 100 people about this. I'm extremely passionate. We're building this really, really cool thing. What do you think of it? Everybody's going to be like, oh, no, I'd totally use that. That sounds great, right? Like it's not as an honest of a response.
And you know what the dumbest question you can ever ask another human being is? Do you understand? How do you know if you understand what I want you to understand?
Yeah, that's a good point.
A better question is, what do you understand? Repeat to me what your understanding is.
I gotcha. Okay, cool.
You can't be the judge of if you understand what I want you to understand, because you don't know. You simply don't know.
Yeah, you don't want a yes and no. You want to know exactly what they're thinking. That makes sense.
So I mean, even if you're building a team, that's like leadership insight. There, it's like never ask your team, do you get it? It's just like, so what do you get? What's your understanding? It not in a condescending way. It's just you have no real idea if you understand.
Yeah.
You know?
Have them repeat it to make sure you're on the same page. I like that. Okay, cool. Yeah. So it sounds like in terms of just like going back to the question that I asked you before, like how do you do outreach? How do you get this happening? It sounds like you find somebody that has industry expertise. You're usually working with somebody that has some deep kind of understanding of what's going on. They have the connections. They're able to make the introductions. If you can't make that happen, you find organizations. If you can't like do direct email outreach or it doesn't work that well, a lot of email outreach that I've done cold is really, really hard to get bites on. I've gotten some interviews, but it's like a 5% conversion rate, and it's really, really difficult for me to find all the contacts.
I think copy can help in there too, where it's sort of like
it might be my copy, yeah.
Well, you never know, right? If you're using the same copy for all of them,
yeah,
probably copy.
It's a good point. A/B test, yeah.
It'll be the copy until you test it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just be like, hey, I'm not looking to sell anything. I want half an hour of your time, and like it's hard to have this discovery conversation half an hour. That's cutting a lot of corners.
Yeah.
That tends to be a good starting point, and so I'll often be like, I want half an hour of your time. I just want to ask you questions about how you do your job. I'm really interested in people like you. I'm trying to solve some problems you have. I want to know what problems you have. I just want to listen to you ramble about the things that upset you. And sometimes people are like, wait, what? Like, for real? Like, you just want to hear me talk. And that's all I want. Because inherently people want to talk, but they don't want to waste their time.
Yeah, I get you.
So, like, some of the things that are important is, like, hey, can I follow up with you on this? Can I keep you updated? Keep a newsletter, even if it's like once a month, be like, hey, first of all, right away, thanks so much for your time, all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. Follow up, yes.
But then keep that newsletter, be like, I wanted to keep you up to date. We're had a bunch more discovery things. And then if I would try and funnel some people into the product advisor council, the PAC council, because that's just going to help you tremendously. And I mean, those are all really tangible, I feel like, basic things. Keep people updated, even, investors, like whoever it is, keep them updated, and just be a good human.
Yeah. I agree. That's a big thing that a lot of people miss. Just be good about it, and that like you want to be like you want to be interesting and you want to be fun in these conversations. Like these are human conversations, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that's helped me the most is like I've only done it and I haven't done a ton of these conversations, but in customer discovery when I have done it, the thing that's helped me a ton is just by being like walking in and being like, whoa, like that is really interesting, like being genuinely interested in what's going on, right? So they want to talk more, so they want to be more engaged.
I mean, bro, if you're not genuinely interested in the people and their problems, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you have no empathy for these people or no sense of
you're not gonna end up creating anything great. Yeah.
People, like, bro, like you have way greater concerns than not finding more people to talk to you. Like if you don't care about them, don't do it. And this is what I tell people: if you want to start a business, but you don't care about a bunch of discoveries, you'll find problems.
Yeah, I get you. That's cool as hell. Okay, awesomeness. So let's see, did I have all my questions answered? I wrote down a whole bunch of warm interest require well best or fund organizations. I think that's all the questions that I have in terms of all of this. This has been really, really great. I can't think of anything different. This gives me like a perfect descriptor. So I actually here, to reference this on my blog/subscribe on my little website. One thing that I published like a good number of like a couple months ago, as I go to resources, templates, and I published a super early or a SMB customer discovery template. So if I'm talking to like businesses or small businesses or anybody that's like running something, how do you do this? And most of the stuff that we actually discussed was in that, and I provided a little email script. I'm probably going to try to rework this based on the stuff that we talked about today, because there's a couple things that you brought up that I didn't really include in that. But I want to make something like this more accessible to people, and so I'm probably gonna try to work this. But if you are interested, most of the stuff that if you're watching, most of the stuff that we discussed is on the customer discovery template on entrepreneur.blog/resources. Then you go to templates. But I'm gonna be reworking that soon.
I track down some of the questions you ask if someone else is starting this, and iterate on the questions. Like other questions will come up, and yeah, I just think, have fun with it. Yeah, no, it should be interesting.
Awesomeness. Well, that's really, really cool. I don't know. Do you have any questions for me? Actually, you mentioned something that I might be interested in, or a product that you're building that I might be interested in. If you want me to like check that out, or let me know.
Yeah, we do that off air.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Good. But okay, cool. Awesomeness. I don't really have any other kind of things to say. If you have any questions for me or you want to talk about anything else, let me know. But beyond that, that was awesome. I appreciate the time. Super, super great having you on. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, reach out to Jeremy, not me. No. Don't bother me. No.
You've done lots of this, man. Like you're on a roll. I think getting good at this is universal and applicable anywhere, and I think it's fun.
Yeah, I agree completely. But yeah, no. So I'm gonna try to make a lot more content on this. I would love to ask your advice as I'm making content. But if you have questions about like customer discovery, entrepreneurship, if you've tried it, if you haven't, please message me. I would love to like try to build up a little bit of a community online or something like this of people trying to do like get their first steps in customer discovery. And I have a lot to learn about it, and I think we all do. So yeah, message me if you're interested in this stuff. Would love to talk about it. But yeah, beyond that, I don't know if do you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, I mean I can ramble forever.
I can also ramble forever.
But no, I'm good.
That sounds great. Well, cool. I'm going to hop off. I appreciate everybody that has joined on LinkedIn, on Twitch, on everything else. It was funny that I got a little message on Twitch. Our only little, I think we had like a couple of viewers on Twitch, but the first one was COVID-19, and he messaged the chat and he said, "Congrats, you've been infected by my followers. Sorry, not sorry. Buy more toilet paper." And so that is where we are as a state of It's good stuff. But cool. Awesome. I don't have anything else to say. Any questions, shoot me a message, and I'll see y'all in the next stream. Thank you for hopping on, Jeremy.
Yeah.